Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Nick Davenport, aka Mr. Mental Muscle, and we're back with Mental Muscle Monday. Now, I want to talk about depression. Now, this isn't a lighthearted topic, and typically it's associated with being lethargic, not wanting to get out of bed, being sad, rumination, having thoughts of doubt that overwhelm you. I don't want to really get into that side from a clinical standpoint because I'm big on the performance side of things. But when we look at depression, let's look at it as how it even evolved to get to this point. There's numerous theories of how depression originally was used to isolate us from the tribe so we can think about what's going on, be creative in our problem solving, figure things out, and then get back to the tribe and then go back to how we can prosper and thrive. Now, over the years, this process may have gotten kind of skewed because we've gotten safer, we have more technology, so problem solving looks a lot different, and it's usually not within us. There's things that can alleviate our day-to-day needs, but back then it was more survival. So you have to think you had to figure it out then, or it meant life or death. But nowadays, like I always said, there's no more saber-toothed tigers, so we don't have to think that deep. So the point is, when we get to that point now, at a point where we feel like it's hard, we don't really keep going, life is getting more intense, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to feel down. Because remember, that is the theory that you feel down, you want to be less social, isolate because it gave you time to really clear your thoughts. And that rumination, like I mentioned before, it usually goes to the dark or the doubts. That's because you need to figure out what the issue is, because the only way to find a solution is to reevaluate what's going on in the first place. So you can see how these have roles, but the problem is we stay in that dark ruminating place for too long. And now that we have our basic needs met, it's easier to stay there and it's harder to get out. Now, this is by no means a clinical diagnosis, but we got to understand that there's daily habits that can help us at least get out of it to some extent. It's not an end all be all. And if it's persisting beyond day-to-day subclinical issues, then you should seek a therapist or some kind of mental health counseling. And that's what that's about. But for this is more so, can I step out of my thought process and try to imagine a scenario where this world looks different? That's one thing we can just do right there, because it's easy to say what could be wrong, but what could be right? Keyword could, because if we can figure out what could be right, at least gives us an idea what that world looks like. That's all we really need. When we're talking from the neuroscience aspect, the neurons are firing in a different pattern, because that rumination, remember, the more you think about that thought, the neurons fire more consistently, more efficiently, meaning it's easier to have those negative doubting thoughts. So that's why when we form these new pathways to say, okay, what could it look like? Can I overcome? What does my life look like when the problem is solved? So you see what I'm going with this? Because once you can figure out at least the direction you need to go, not saying it's the end all be all automatic win, but at least opens the door for your brain to even see that direction, because we typically focus on what we think about mostly all the time. It's just like practicing a skill. If I practice doing squats, I can't expect my biceps to get bigger, right? It's the same premise. Now, like I said, if it goes deeper than that, I do advise to seek more clinical help. But if it's something that's more day-to-day, because majority of mental health issues are something we can solve within problem solving within ourselves, or even getting a social network that help us out. So this is something to consider so you can get out of whatever hole you may be in and get your mind right.